I know we've all been there. That moment when you send a message to one of your colleagues and all of a sudden you feel this overwhelming fear of dread take over your body. And it's because you realize that there is not one single emoji in sight. Yes, I said emoji. If you're giggling, we've all been there. It's that moment when you realize that person has no idea that you were smiling as you were hitting send, and they think you're being too serious. Now, I know it's crazy, but these are the conversations that are coming up more and more in the workplace. So I thought, why not kick back, relax, and have a fun, lighthearted episode where we talk about emojis in the workplace, because it's affecting everyone, and the stats that are coming out and the polls that have been conducted are crazy to see how much this has just been adopted in the workplace. So stick around, kick back, relax, grab a tea, coffee, something stronger if it's the evening. I'm not judging. And we'll get into some lighthearted discussion. Hi everyone, welcome back to Lawlands. My name is Sanam and thank you so much for tuning in today. Emojis in the workplace. If you know me and you follow me on LinkedIn, you know I'm all about the emojis. Why? Because a lot of lawyers don't use emojis. And you didn't hear that from me. Lawyers, for some reason, are very emoji adverse. I love a good emoji. And that's probably because I feel like my messages never come across as lighthearted or fun unless I've thrown a smile in there. And now that's probably an insecurity that's developed over the years. But hey, I'm not judging you. You don't judge me, all right? Now, emojis in the workplace are always going to be interesting because it's something that's just happened over time and we've naturally adopted it. And it doesn't matter if you have Slack as your forum at work or Teams, even your employees just communicating via WhatsApp or Messenger or even on Snapchat, Instagram, all of those areas and platforms, they can use emojis and it's very commonplace now to use them. But it's becoming so commonplace that we're not talking about it as much. However, this year, I've noticed that the conversation is cropping up more and more. So much so that about a week or two ago, I read an article by HRD where Lane Neve's team got together and they basically wrote an article around emojis in the workplace, what this means for employers, what employers need to look out for, things to consider, everything under the sun. And I found it fascinating because it's a conversation that doesn't come up too often, but when it does, it really sparks a lot of curiosity. I saw that in May, I believe, earlier this year, Shannon came on Radio NZ from Frog Recruitment, and they actually conducted a poll. And the numbers were so interesting. Out of the 1,300 people that they surveyed, 75% of them said that they use emojis in their day-to-day in the workplace. So it's completely normal. I do too, and I'm sure you do as well. But the question is, how do you actually monitor this? What parameters do you set? What happens in the workplace? Is it a situation where you really have to watch every smiley face emoji, every eggplant emoji? What is an employer to do, right? So I wanted to get into all of these different nuances and these different areas of emoji usage so that it gets you thinking as well. Because a lot of times language, now I guess emojis, all of these other factors, they play into your day-to-day in the workplace, but they also affect the company's culture as well. So before we get into it, I just wanted to say thank you so much to everyone that's following the podcast. If you're new here, then hi, I'm Sanam. And if you like these episodes and you're liking today's one, then go and check out the podcast library. There's tons of episodes there and lots of different areas from lighthearted fun all the way through to some nitty-gritty employment law stuff. So check it out. And if you want regular insights, then jump over onto LinkedIn and give me a follow because I post there frequently and maybe once a week is just not enough for your employment law fix. All right, now getting into this emoji conversation, you want to make sure that the emojis can't be misinterpreted, that they're all kosher and everything's looking really good. So let's get into a little bit of discussion around emoji usage because it's just becoming like the modern day hieroglyphics. You can have an entire conversation and just send emojis, or you can have the most serious message and end that with an emoji with the tongue sticking out of its mouth, and all of a sudden it's a lighthearted message. So it's crazy how something that's just a little image can change the entire interpretation of a message. But emojis, they're not just cute anymore, and they can have real consequences for the workplace. I know whenever we talk about the generational divide, everyone rolls their eyes and they go, okay, here we go again. But think about it. every generation would have a different style of communication. Just like if you were a leader and you were talking to people, the way that you would manage people, the way that you would communicate with them would be different if they were in their 60s, if they were in their 30s. And it's because generationally we approach situations a lot different. We have different ways of thinking and the way that we break things down, and different ways of interpreting things. So what do I mean by that? Well, the thumbs up emoji was a major case that came out in Canada, and it was definitely a situation which was misinterpreted because what we're seeing is certain emojis are interpreted differently by different generations as well. I'm a millennial, and I'm putting myself in my millennial shoes, and I'm thinking, the thumbs up emoji, if I receive a thumbs up emoji from my manager, it makes me a little bit uncomfortable in the beginning. And it's because I feel like a thumbs up emoji is very dismissive, but it's really not. You're just saying, that's great, or that's awesome, or fantastic, or yes, I agree. But for some reason, certain generations, like for example, Gen Z, millennials, they might not be as receptive to a thumbs up emoji as maybe the Gen Xers or the boomers. And it's such a small thing, but it can make such a huge impact. And I remember really early on when I got my first thumbs up emoji from a manager, this was years ago, I thought, oh, that's so horrible. Why are they so dismissive? They absolutely weren't. They're just busy and they were just agreeing and going, yep, that's a great idea. But for some reason, my brain was hardwired to take this in such a negative way. So emojis and interpretations and the generational interpretation really does matter. And that Canadian case where the employee gave a thumbs up was a perfect example of that there are real consequences and people can misinterpret certain emojis. Not the saucy, spicy ones like the fruits and vegetables, but the ones that are just stock standard, that are a thumbs up or that are a smiley face. But you may be wondering where emojis go wrong, right? There's obviously misinterpretation, but also the use of incorrect emojis in the workplace too. So I'll give you an example. I was talking to some colleagues over a year and a half ago, and when we were chatting, someone mentioned that they knew of a manager that would react to every message on Slack with an eggplant emoji. No matter what someone wrote, they would put an eggplant emoji in there. And I thought, that's insane. That is absolutely crazy, as if they wouldn't know what an eggplant emoji actually means. And someone turned around and said, and they were a Gen Xer, and they turned around and they said, hey, people don't know the double meanings of these emojis. And then I thought, actually, that's a really valid point. People don't know. Who would know other than if you were on social media and consuming things day in and day out that a eggplant emoji meant something or a peach emoji meant something else? No one would have any idea around that unless you got that information from some sort of social media platform. And I think Alex Hormozi said it recently where he said right now a lot of the newer generation, they say something like stop the cap, which means don't lie or stop the BS effectively. What Alex Hormozi said was that a lot of times the emoji that will come up will be a blue hat or a blue cap, and that's why people say stop the cap. Now, for him, he interpreted it as no blue hat, and he would use that in a sentence, and people would say, what does that mean? And then he realized that the actual terminology and the reason why it's using a blue cap is actually to just say stop the cap. Now, those are the things. The language is changing, emoji usage is changing. You want to make sure that you're using emojis that are appropriate. And the next thing would be mixed messaging. You don't want to get the wires crossed there. You don't want it to look like all of a sudden that you're sending somebody a bit of a spicy message by using the wrong kind of emoji. Make sure that your emojis are not ambiguous or suggestive in any capacity. And the last thing that you want is for something to be interpreted in a way where it gets escalated to HR, right? These are the areas where emojis can definitely go wrong, where you might have used the incorrect emoji, not necessarily an appropriate one in a saucy, spicy sense, but more so the incorrect emoji. Maybe you've put a sticking your tongue out emoji or a laughing face emoji or a crying emoji when the circumstance and the situation just wasn't the place for it. And you'd be surprised, right? There's always something that can come up. And one of the things I mentioned earlier was around kind of language and how that is something that we always see coming up in workplaces. the use of appropriate language or appropriate communications when you're in the workplace. Because we always hear, especially in larger businesses, when you've got lots of people, everyone comes with their own different styles, their own different ways of communicating and working. And sometimes you have people that have conversations that are quite insensitive, or they don't realize that what they're actually saying might offend somebody. We're seeing it come up more and more in the workplace, and it's really difficult to navigate. I remember many years ago, I dealt with the personal grievance where an employee said that the employer was bullying them and spoke to them inappropriately. One of the things that they said was that, and I'm not going to swear here, I'll use the shortened form. So basically, they owned a cafe, they were running the cafe, and the employee was their star and stellar employee that was their head chef, effectively. And one of the things that came up and became a running joke was that we can't have any more frittatas on the menu. I remember very vividly, because I had to write this in the personal grievance response, that the employer wrote on the whiteboard, "No more effing frittatas." But it was a joke, and it was a banter that they had as a team. But the employee took that out of context, and I can say this openly now with 100% certainty because it was all something that came out during the case. But they took that out of context, and then they used that and said, this is how the employer treats me. They treat me in a way where they're being demeaning, derogatory, they swear at me. And you can see how this whole situation flipped. And it's not because of the employer and the employee having an issue during the employment relationship. Things just started to sour towards the end. So anything and everything was up for grabs for the employee to prove their case and show that the employer was bullying in nature, that they were inappropriate in the workplace. I think that's really valuable and really important to understand that language, just like with emoji usage as well, it matters, right? You want to make sure that there isn't anything being said in the workplace where the employee can turn around and say that I've been spoken to inappropriately or anything derogatory has been sent in the workplace. The last thing that you want is for them to turn around and say that they've been berated in any capacity. So this is where it can go wrong. And when you're dealing with these situations, that you really sit back and have a look at your workplace. You may be wondering, what can I actually do? It's all up to you on the culture that you want to set in your workplace. In terms of how to navigate it, you can put policies in place on what appropriate language is and what appropriate communication is. Having a detailed policy in there, just about, even if it's to do with etiquette in the workplace, how you need to dress if they're coming into work, maybe wearing PPE, whatever it is, you can tie it into a policy that you have. You can easily just set the expectation across the company by sending everybody a memo or an email just to let them know that this is what you're looking at implementing moving forward. And it's really important for people to understand that when they're moving into new roles, and this is for all of the employees out there that might be listening, I don't think that there might be too many, but for all of those employees that are not on the HR side and not on the employer side, you also need to be mindful of the workplaces that you're going into, because what might have been okay in your last job probably will not work in this job if the culture is very different in the workplace. And it's really important to understand your surroundings, to understand your new environment. And something to keep in mind as well is that even if you're an employer, an employee, manager, leader, anything that you write in the workplace, it's going to remain there. Unless someone goes in and deletes it, it will be there. So it's really important to make sure that the messages that you're sending, the way that you're communicating, is something you can look back on and say, hey, this is appropriate and this was fine for the workplace. Now, I believe that there has to be a fine balance that's struck, because the last thing that you want is going, I'm not going to use emojis. I hope this email finds you well, all of that kind of stuff. No one wants any of that. But we also don't want emojis thrown at us left, right, and center that are inappropriate. So it's all about finding the balance by using your better judgment. And if you feel like in your workplace, things are getting out of hand, just like with outbursts and people swearing in the workplace or speaking in a demeaning way to other people, all of that can be monitored and all of that can be set up in a policy if you really need it for your workplace. So keep in mind that emojis can have double meanings, that they can be interpreted differently by lots of different people and in people in different generations, and not everyone will communicate with emojis. They might be very straight in their message and they might not want to put that laughing face in there to make it all seem okay. So thank you so much, everyone. If you enjoyed this chat, then like I said, make sure that you tune into our podcast on a weekly basis because I dive into some juicy topics that will keep you compliant and make sure that you're on the right side of the law. Now, until next time, make sure that you go easy on the emojis and you use them with caution. I hope you have a lovely day, night, evening, morning, whatever it may be. And guess what? I'll catch you in the next one, everyone.